Right. Well, first off, thank you everyone for giving up your lunch break, for giving up your time today to come on to our a regular spotlight session. So these are put on free of charge. None of our guests charge us. We don't charge. We want to try and give something back, and we do that through these spotlight sessions. Anyone who's signed up will get a copy of the recording, post the webinar recording, and you will be able to see it a few days later. It's up on our YouTube channel as well. And what's even more of a delight today is that our spotlight guest, who I won't do too much of an introduction because I'm sure Tanya will, is one of our amazing partners that we work with in the health and wellbeing space, and is the incredible company called Karma, experts in everything stress related, bringing it down, not introducing, as
Thanks for the
well as
clarity there.
as well as mindfulness. And just, and Tanya, if anyone's seen her on LinkedIn, is a huge advocate of supporting businesses, individuals to actually, excel and do better. But how do we do that? Well, we look after the people. And Tanya and I think probably first met nearly 2 years ago, and we do a lot of great things collaboratively. And it was only right that our September, our autumnal spotlight should be kicked off. So all over in your very safe hands, Tanya. Lovely to see you.
Great to see you too, Simon and Emma, and thank you so much again for having me here today. It's such a pleasure to be here. Hello, everyone who's joining. So great to connect with you all. Feel free to keep the comments coming in the chat box with where you're dialing in from. It's always great to see. And yeah, just as a sort of extensive introduction as to who I am and what qualifies me to be here to talk to you all today about managing stress and preventing burnout. So my name is Tania Diggory. I'm the founder and director of Karma. We're a UK-based burnout prevention and mental health training organisation. So it dovetails beautifully with the amazing work that Thrive does in the space of mental health and neurodiversity. And what we specialize in is educating that journey of what happens when you are going through stress and then what happens with burnout. What does it look like? What are the signs and symptoms? How to prevent burnout from escalating, and how to nurture and look after your mental health and well-being on a daily basis to prevent any crisis from happening. So we're very much about prevention is better than a cure. And so I'm really excited today to be here to share a whistle stop tour with you all about managing stress and preventing burnout. So as an organisation, we offer a range of CPD accredited training courses, masterclasses, and events and digital products in this space, supporting entrepreneurs, small to large organisations of all different shapes and sizes. And yes, our message is prevention is better than a cure. So everything we do is drawn from evidence-based neuroscience research. So we'll delve into a bit of that today with the time that we have as well. So with this being a webinar format and the time that we have together, it's going to be, dipping our toes in the water, so to speak, but I hope it will leave you with a lot of inspiration and most importantly, some really practical tools that you can take away and start putting into practice straight away. And it would be great to know, as well as you sharing in the chat box where you're dialing in from, what do you do? It'd be great to know kind of what businesses you run, or if you're dialing in from working within a company, just to get a sense of who's in the room as well. A bit about my background. I set up Karma around 9 years ago. And it was off the back of having run two other businesses previously and gone through a really high period of stress and burnout, needing to take time out of work and then struggling with anxiety, in particular panic attacks on and off for about a year. And as some of you may know, if you're dialing in as a business owner yourself, it is very difficult to take time out of your business. And it just really shone a light for me at the time. We're talking about 10 years ago here, where it just really shone a light that there wasn't really a lot of support around at that time for business owners and businesses in general around mental health and well-being support. So I really struggled to find the right kind of support for myself. And I didn't really also understand what was happening, what was going on. I didn't know what those signs and symptoms meant around burnout, around panic attacks, anxiety. So it was a real learning curve for me and a journey of curiosity to understand more about mental health. And through that recovery and managing my mental health in a way that worked for me, that's what set me on a new path, really. And and being inspired to set up a platform that said to other professionals, look, if you're struggling, it's okay. And it's a normal human experience. Let's normalize the conversation around it. And this is what you can do to help yourself. And let's be really practical about this. And let's look at what you can do on a day-to-day basis to help yourself and prevent any burnout issues from escalating in the first place. So that's a very small version of my story in terms of where the inspiration was. And then I retrained as an NLP practitioner, neurolinguistic programming, mindfulness teacher, mental health trainer through Mind, the mental health charity in the UK, and mental health first aid. So everything that we do is drawn from inspiration and research in those practices as well. So great to be here, and thank you all so much for engaging in the chat as well. And hopefully you'll find this to be a really informative and practical session too. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully you'll all see that. And just let me know if there's any issues there. Hopefully this is all clear. So what's really great about the timing of this webinar, and thank you again to the Thrive team for inviting us to speak on this topic, is we're just off the back of World Suicide Prevention Day, which was last week on the 10th. We've got National Inclusion Week coming up at the end of September. There is also World Mental Health Day coming up in October, on the 10th of October. So lots of really poignant times of year that we're experiencing at the moment and that are coming up, that really gives us a chance to pause and reflect and think about our own mental health, those around us, and what we can do to support ourselves. So our philosophy at Karma is that a happy mind makes for a happy business. So the kind of three pillars that we focus on is around education, the importance of nurturing your mindset and your well-being to nurture good mental health; community, the importance of building your support system and your tribe; and connection. So not only deepening a connection with other people, but enhancing that self-awareness and connection with yourself and understanding yourself as best you can and what nurtures your mental health. So the learning outcomes from today is we're going to go through an overview of the complexity of mental health, common signs and symptoms, and nurturing mental wellness. We'll look at the difference between stress and burnout, how to prevent it from escalating, and preventative measures and how to manage stress levels, and then practical techniques for nurturing mental wellness, resilience. Everything's drawn from evidence-based research. So I love starting with a quote, and this quote I feel just really encapsulates nicely what we're talking about here. In the new definition of success, building and looking after our financial capital is not enough. We need to do everything we can to protect and nurture our human capital. Very true words. And I think especially since the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot more people are more vividly aware of the vital importance of mental health and just how much we need to be paying attention to it, like we do our physical health and emotional health, etc. So they're all interlinked, as we'll explore today further as well. So let's just start by talking about mental health. I'd love you to share in the chat box with each other as well. What springs to mind for you? If I were to say the name, the term even, mental health, what comes to mind? Is it a word? Is it a phrase? Is it something else entirely? There's no right or wrong because there are so many different ways that we can explore mental health and what it means. So please don't be shy. It would be great to get an understanding of what your perceptions are who are joining today. And for those watching the recording as well, just have a think for yourself in this moment as well. What actually comes to mind for you? So whether it's a sort of a positive association, whether it's a challenging association, whatever comes up, just share in the chat box. And I'm going to just come out for a moment just to see what is being shared, and then we'll come back in. So mental health. Susan is saying mental health is all about how I think, feel, and behave. Oh, it's like you dipped into this presentation I'm sharing and just sort of had an insight there. Perfect. We're going to be talking about that. Thank you so much. And the ability to cope with ups and downs that life throws at us. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that too, Emma. Oh, no, not Emma, sorry, Carolyn. It came up as siren training there, so I was just checking on your name. Nicola, well-being and how we manage our mood. I love that. Managing is so important. That's such a key word when it comes to mental health. It's how we manage our mental health, right? The emotional and spiritual resilience that enables people to thrive. That's Peter and Hannah. Thank you so much. And Simon, strength and hope. Priest, 2016, stress and depression. Oh my gosh, that is such a key point there. I'm going to come back to that. Christine, psychological, social and emotional responses. Absolutely. Just look at how broad that is with those answers. I love it. What Simon says there is so true. Pre-2016, like if I'd asked this question in my training sessions, it would be stress, depression, anxiety, psychosis, like all of those types of answers, which of course are completely valid and very true answers, but they were way more in favor of the sort of negativity bias associated with mental health. Whereas what we've got here is a really broad overview of different perspectives around mental health that isn't just associated with the challenging aspects, but our minds are so much more open nowadays to inviting a wider conversation around mental health, like we would with physical health and looking at physical fitness, agility, diet, exercise, all those things that are good for our physical fitness. We're looking at mental fitness as well, and the things that support our emotional responses, help us cope, help us to thrive. So it is really important to look at mental health from those varying perspectives. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing so far. That's great. So let's get back into the presentation. So really great overview of responses there. I think it's really important when we're talking about mental health to look at defining mental wellness and mental illness for those reasons that I just said, that so that there's no bias towards it and looking at it from a holistic perspective. So there are a couple of great examples here I'm going to share of defining this. There are lots of ways we can talk about mental wellness and illness, so these are just a couple. But the Global Wellness Institute cites that mental wellness is an internal resource that helps us to think, feel, connect, and function. It is an active process that helps us to build resilience, grow, and flourish. I love this quote because it really helps us think about the active element of nurturing and looking after your mental well-being. It's not just a case of getting to a point where you feel fully confident and you're never going to struggle again. That's not realistic. That's not the human experience, right? So it's something that you actively choose to do to look after your mental health, just like you do with physically exercising to keep yourself fit and healthy physically, right? So it's something to think about from the perspective of, you know, when we're talking about mental health at large, we do need to mention mental wellness, not just mental health in general, because that can bring up lots of different types of perceptions and biases as well. So actually, let's broaden the terminology that we use, mental wellness versus mental illness as well. And let's get people thinking more about what does it mean to be mentally well. From a mental illness perspective, the World Health Organization cites it as a mental disorder, also referred to as a mental health condition, characterized by a clinically significant disturbance in an individual's cognition, emotional regulation, or behavior. It's usually associated with distress or impairment in important areas of functioning. And there can be so many factors that contribute towards this, whether it's genetic or inheritance factors, but also from an environmental perspective. A huge amount of data and research highlights that our environment plays a huge part in terms of how we think, feel, and behave, right? So, and it can therefore affect our mental health and mental well-being. So mental health conditions, struggles, issues can come about from a variety of circumstances, but it is a real struggle to live day to day in a way that, you know, enables you to thrive and support yourself. And there are lots of different resources that are perhaps needed to support that individual, whether it's therapy, counselling, support groups, you know, your current network, looking at how you holistically help yourself. It's not necessarily just one thing or another. So really opening up that conversation in a much broader way when we're talking about mental health, let's invite the conversation around mental wellness and illness just to have those definitions more widely talked about and normalizing that conversation more, because it really is a human experience. Every single one of us struggles with our mental health from time to time, just as we nurture and look after our mental health in different ways. So we can look at mental health as a scale, like a sliding scale, right? That we all fluctuate in and out of. So it's like a state of well-being, and our state of well-being can fluctuate to a positive state of mental health or neutral state where you're not feeling great, not bad, somewhere in the middle, and a state of poor mental health. So that word state there is really key because our state does fluctuate depending on our circumstances in our daily lives, right? And just a point about that term there, well-being. Well-being encapsulates how we feel and function on a day-to-day basis. It's how we feel in terms of our mental health, but also our physical, emotional, social, spiritual health. It's how we feel in terms of what quality sleep we're getting, diet, exercise. All of these factors contribute and feed into our overall holistic state of our general health and well-being. So health and well-being is a huge term, but the reality is that our mental health plays a big part in our overall health and well-being, because when our mental health is affected, it has a natural knock-on effect on the other aspects of our health and well-being. So essentially, it starts with the mind, doesn't it? When you think about it, whatever we're going through, what influences our mood, our emotions, our feelings, it starts with a thought. It starts with the brain, our mind kicking into gear with a thought that then influences how we're feeling physically, any physical responses that come up in the body, emotional responses, and then that impacts our behavior. So really, when we think about it, when we're talking about mental health, physical health, etc., they're all interconnected and they're all constantly in communication with one another. Which makes sense when you think about it, because every single one of us has a brain, a mind, a physical being, emotions encased within that being. So they're all constantly in communication. When we have more time on this content, I go into a little bit more detail around the neuroscience of this, but essentially, in short, we can all experience states of poor mental health. And if you're struggling with low mood, anxiousness, etc., that doesn't mean that you are depressed or you have an anxiety disorder necessarily, because what happens first and foremost is those are signs and symptoms that come to the surface to signal to your body to pay attention that something doesn't feel right. And then it's a question of how long does it continue to last for? How much is it influencing your day-to-day life and experience of life? And does it escalate into something more serious, right? So the longer something goes on for, and from a mental health first aid perspective, it's recommended, if something doesn't feel right for a consistency of at least around 2 weeks or so, then really it's a good opportunity and very vital opportunity to try and intercept, speak to someone, get some help and support, just share the load in some way so that it doesn't escalate into something more serious. Because then what happens if you're just seeing your tunnel vision, one view, one kind of way of thinking of something that's really challenging and bringing you down on a day-to-day basis, it's very difficult to pick yourself up from that. And it starts to have a neurological shift in the brain as well. So we have trillions of different neural pathways in the brain that operate for various functionalities, from our habits, our routines, our behaviors, etc. Our brushing our teeth in the morning, the things that we do that just naturally come to us, we don't even think about it. We're wired to think and behave and act in certain ways that just become normal for us, right, throughout our lives. And then when we start to think and behave differently, for say, the example of struggle with the mental health, and you're thinking, a negative stream of thoughts, challenging stream of thoughts, really struggling to pick yourself up, that then starts to shift neurologically the wiring in the brain to think of that as a new norm, right? The longer you're in that state for. So what the term I'm talking about here, if you want to look into it in more detail, because like I said, we don't have a lot of time together today, is neuroplasticity. It's what happens in the brain when it starts to shift and adapt based on our experiences of life. But the really amazing part of that is, and the hopeful outcome of that, is that our brain is actually designed for adaptability and change. So even if you end up in a really difficult situation and neurologically really struggling to get by day to day, the brain is designed to adapt. So finding the right kind of support, the right kind of help can enable you to bounce back even from a really difficult situation. So that I think is a really important insight to take away. Even if someone feels like they're in the darkest place and they're struggling to get out of it, our brain can cope with adaptability and change, and it's designed for that. So, there is always hope. There is always opportunities and choices to get help and support. It's just making sure that people know what those elements of support are, right? So a brief whistle stop tour with that. There's a, kind of open way of thinking here about mental health and how it can affect us all in different ways. We all have mental health, just like we all have physical health, etc. So our state really does have an impact on our mental, physical, and emotional well-being. So our thoughts directly link to our physical responses in our body and our feelings, and then impact how we behave. So if you think about a time when you felt a bit stressed, a bit, worried, anxious, frustrated about something, what do you notice in your body? You might notice your heart rate increases, you feel tension in your stomach or in different muscles in your body. You might have tension headaches that come on. You might feel a little bit sick or nauseous. Your breathing might change, right? You suddenly feel like you're going, oh, I can't believe this happened. I've got to sort this out now. And then you have shallow, sharper bursts of breath that actually is perhaps making you feel lightheaded and your body's not getting the optimal oxygen levels that it needs to function well. And emotionally you might feel, really drained, frustrated, angry, whatever it is, and that influences how you behave. On the flip side of that, if you think about a time when you felt really positive and happy and had a really joyful moment, what do you notice is different? You're not holding on to that tension and tightness in your body. Everything feels more relaxed, perhaps. You feel more open, more at ease. You might still feel excited about something. So it's like maybe a tension in the stomach, but a different intention. So you feel butterflies in the stomach, like a excitement rather than anxiousness, for example. Your breathing may very well feel different. Have you ever had a moment where you've had a break or you're on holiday or you're just enjoying the moment, whatever it is, and you just go, this is lovely. Just really enjoying this, right? And it's something that you perhaps don't even consciously think of or that you're consciously aware of. But what's happening in your body is it's naturally responding to its environment. So your thoughts are more relaxed, more happy, positive. Therefore, your body goes, ah, and relaxes too. There's no tension holding onto your muscles. Your airways open up, you breathe deeply, your lungs expand more, so your breathing shifts, and then that supports your body therefore as well. Right, so those are just two quick examples. So how our thoughts in our head can impact how we're feeling and therefore how we behave. So when we're thinking of stress in and of itself, isn't necessarily a bad thing. There is small bursts of stress that actually can have a positive outcome, right? So you may be aware of some of this, information that I'm sharing now that's kind of widely known around, the evolutionary part of the brain. So there's a part of the brain called the amygdala, which is a small almond shape, small but very powerful central part of the brain. And this is known as the fear center, the stress response. It's the protective mechanism in your brain. So the things that you might have heard of is, the relation to, imagine being chased by a saber-toothed tiger back in the day. Thankfully, we don't have those issues now, but our stress responses are varied and different in our modern day living, right? You might have an email that pops up in your inbox and instantly gives you that stress response. And you feel that threat and danger, that need to run away from the situation or face it head on. The fight, flight, or freeze response essentially is what I'm talking about here. So that mechanism, that small part of the brain that manages the stress response, is small but is mighty, and it's a very important part of the brain, and we actually do need it to signal when we need to pay attention to something. So if you are actually in a dangerous situation, you need that stress response to kick in to tell you what to do or to signal to you need to do something. But our automatic response in that reactive mode is fight, flight, or freeze. We either fight it, as in take action, do something about it, or we flight, we run away from the situation, pretend it's not happening, or we freeze on the spot and we don't know what to do, and we feel, a bit frozen in that moment. So that stress response is quite reactive, right? From an evolutionary perspective, it's the oldest part of the brain because it's our survival mechanism. It helps us to look after ourselves and protect ourselves at the same time. So we do need it in short bursts, right? But it's the high level of stress for long periods of time that's unresolved. That's the issue that we're facing as pretty much a crisis in our workplaces in today's world, right? There's too much high stress, too much high pressure, too much pace to keep up with, particularly with all the communication channels and a lot of people feeling the need to be working 24/7 just because they have a laptop or they're available, right? So we're not designed as human beings to experience high stress for long periods of time. We need ebbs and flows, ups and downs. Yes, we go into stress, but we need to find a way to come out of it, okay? And then, yeah, maybe we go through something stressful again, but how do you get yourself out of that stress response and calm and then feel better able to cope with whatever else is coming up? So we need to understand it from that perspective. So ebbs and flows is really important. When we experience high levels of stress for long periods of time that's unresolved, that's where we can experience higher fluctuations in anxiety, in mood issues, other potential mental health distresses. And then eventually this can lead to burnout, which essentially is mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion. Like a car running with no fuel, there's just nothing left to give. And it's a really depleting energetically place to be. And it can be very debilitating, take you out of work for a while, take you out of your circumstances, and a really challenging place to be. And it varies from person to person in terms of how long this can last for, because you've completely depleted your energy levels by this point. And sometimes unconsciously, right? Because sadly, we live in a world now that also, in many ways, not everywhere, but a lot of places where high stress is a badge of honor. Like you're not working hard enough unless you're showing that you're really highly stressed and really, just working all the time. But we're not made like machines. We're human beings, not human doings. One of my favorite phrases, right? We're not designed to just be doing and doing all the time. We need ebbs and flows. We need times to come back down, to regroup, recharge our batteries, and then, go back into whatever we're doing. So the 5 stages of burnout is a model that we developed at Karma, inspired by the Winona State University study on burnout. I believe that Emma and Simon did share this link in the write-up of this webinar. If you haven't had a chance to look at it yet, you can find it on our website, thisiskarma.com, and it's our highest performing blog. It outlines all of these steps in more detail. So with the time that we have together today, it's probably good to have a bit of a deeper dive into this in your own time. But it just gives you an overview today of how stress can escalate and build. So it's not just a quick thing. For some people, stress builds to a point over months or even years before it becomes burnout. For other people, it will be a shorter period of time. everyone's window of tolerance is completely different. This is why the self-awareness piece, understanding what is maximum for you in terms of your capacity, is really important. And that's the work for you to do individually, because no one's going to know that but you, right? So the honeymoon phase, onset of stress, chronic stress, burnout, and habitual burnout are 5 really key stages to be aware of. And we go through this in a lot more detail in our blog. So please do check that out, the 5 stages of burnout. And just as a brief overview here from a neurological perspective, just to expand a bit more on what I was talking about here from the amygdala. So this stress response just gives you a visual here of that small part of the brain, right? Research has shown that blood can actually drain from different parts of the brain to that part to give it strength and power when it activates, right? That's how strong it is, because it is the protective mechanism. It's trying to keep you safe. It's trying to keep you away from danger, or what we register to be a danger or a threat. And like I say, that can be different circumstances. It's all relative to whatever sparks that stress response for you. But right next to the amygdala, you can see there's an area called the hippocampus. This is the part of the brain that regulates your emotions and feelings, but it's also where your working memory is stored. And then you've got the prefrontal cortex part of the brain here, the frontal lobe, more human and evolved part of the brain, which handles logical thinking, decision making, planning, doing that part of the brain, critical thinking. When your stress response fires off, those other two parts of the brain, the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex, are not working in tandem together, right? So when we talk about stress reduction techniques, ways to bring stress back, having those ebbs and flows, that is enabling the hippocampus to do its job and your prefrontal cortex to do its job as well. You cannot expect yourself to make effective decisions and to think logically and clearly when you're just firing off on the fear factor, on that fear response in the brain. The easy thing to do when you're highly stressed is just to react in the moment. And very often our responses won't necessarily be that logical. It would be more highly emotionally charged, not necessarily think of the wider context of what's going on or other people's feelings or perceptions of what you might say. You might just react quickly and say something that you regret. That we've all been there, right? It's a very human thing to do. So understanding what can we do to help ourselves de-stress when this is happening, so that I can process my emotions and my feelings in a better way, so that I can bring resources back into the prefrontal cortex. This is why, evidence-based stress reduction techniques, mindfulness-based techniques, meditation, for example, all of these types of things and more are so effective and so important, because they're regulating and managing your stress levels and helping you not just be firing off on all cylinders from the amygdala part of the brain, but it's helping you to tap into other parts of the brain so they work in tandem together and help you feel more effective in your day-to-day life. So when I go through a few techniques with you now, it's not to say, oh, that eradicates the stress. Of course it doesn't sorry. So of course it doesn't take away the stress that's happening. But what it does do is put you, your brain, your mind, in switching it into a different gear, so that you can feel more in control of your circumstances, feel more in control of your response, feel more calm, a bit more rested and grounded, so that you're better able to make more effective decisions and communicate more effectively as well. All right, so let's get started on one of the techniques. It's creating your own stress reduction list. So I would encourage you to grab a piece of paper and pen rather than be on a device for this, because let's face it, we spend way too much of our times on devices anyway. So let's have a nice little break from that. So if you have pen and paper to hand, great. If not, of course, feel free to use your phone or laptop or whatever. But this list is to come back to. So it's an active list to keep coming back to. And I just want you to spend 30 seconds or so just to get started, because we don't have a lot of time together, to write down as many things as you can think of that help you to de-stress, from the small things to the big things. All right. So I'm going to sound very British as I say this, but a small example could be a really nice soothing cup of tea and a biscuit or something like that with it. And that's all you need in that moment. Just a few minutes to take a step back, enjoy a hot soothing drink and a little treat, and it just resets you a little bit, right? Or it could be listening to music, it could be doing something creative, reading, cooking, gardening, mindfulness-based activities, spending time with loved ones, whatever it is. Just write down as many things as you can think of in this moment that help you to de-stress. And of course, if you're watching the recording of this after, you can hit pause and spend as long as you like. So just while you're writing that, some of you might be writing this and thinking, okay, yeah, that sounds about right. I guarantee you there is more to uncover. So wherever you're getting started with now, it's just getting started. There will be lots of gems to uncover there. And there's 2 reasons for this. Like I said, this is supposed to be an active list that you can come back to anytime that you need to keep adding to it. So keep it to hand. This is why I think a physical version is much better. So you can keep it physically in your space as a reminder. And there are things for you to come back to when you need that quick, reminder of what helps you to de-stress. So when we're in a situation where our stress response is highly charged, we're not necessarily going to be thinking about what's going to help us in that moment to feel more calm, right? We're just going to be, probably quite reactive. So all you need to do is say, I need to go to my stress reduction list, pick one thing on there to help me feel more calm, be present and grounded in the moment. Do that for a minute or so, whatever it is, and then that will help you feel better able to cope with whatever stressful event it is that you're facing. The other thing is you're writing down a list of all the things that bring you joy. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time that you did those things? Some of you might be like, yeah, I do them all the time, in which case, brilliant. Others, you might be a bit, surprised and think, gosh, when was the last time that I did that for myself? Just as you prioritize other things in your life, other responsibilities to do with work, outside of work, it's so important to prioritize time for ourselves. It's not a selfish thing to do, it is selfless. Because when you even prioritize, even if it's just bits of time, snippets, little pockets of time here and there, and longer periods where you can, you're ensuring throughout the week that you're having those ebbs and flows. So no matter what's happening, you've planned it in, said, I'm going to have a break here, I'm going to do this after work, or I'm going to plan this on the weekend. You're ensuring those ebbs and flows are happening. So no matter what happens, you're giving yourself that time to come down. So the stress response isn't constantly feeling like it's active. And it's giving yourself that time to just regroup, recharge, and reset. And by doing that, not only are you in a better position to be at your best for yourself, but you're in a much better position to be at your best for others around you too. So if you manage teams, if you have children, family members, other responsibilities, you're also protecting them by protecting your energy levels as well. So I'd really encourage you to use this list as a dose of inspiration to plan into your weeks. And I don't mean try and cram more stuff into an already packed schedule. I mean, look at your week and your calendar and honestly look at what you can let go of just for a few minutes here and there, a little bit of time here and there. What can you start saying no to or delay a little bit so you can make time for yourself? It's a worthwhile investment. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. So moving swiftly on, because we haven't got much longer left. It's a quote from my first book that I wrote. All the information's on our website, as I'll share at the end if you want to look into this in more detail. But it is a book about entrepreneurship and well-being and managing your well-being in business. Change is a constant in nature and therefore a constant in our lives. How we respond to change is essentially in our control, and our reactions can have a significant impact on how we deal with challenging situations. So just a bit of food for thought there. So ways to nurture good mental health through talking and writing. So two outlets that you can utilize to support and nurture your mental health on a regular basis, especially when you notice things are getting stressful, they're getting really highly impactful. So these are a few mindset techniques drawn from evidence-based research. Talking with someone, we've all heard that phrase, a problem shared is a problem halved. It literally releases the load. It doesn't mean necessarily you will in that moment figure out what to do. The whole point here is it's a process. When you're struggling with your mental health or feeling highly stressed, not sure what to do or what next step to do, just one small step can make a massive difference to help you on the next step that you need to support yourself. So whether it's talking, whether it's writing things down, having things clear and tangible to look at on paper, whatever works for you. So HALT is a very popular technique used in counseling and therapy practices, sorry. And it stands for, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? So you can just ask yourself that quick, question. So halt, i.e. stop what you're doing, give yourself permission to just stop and pause and ask yourself, am I hungry? Is my four basic needs actually being met? Feeding myself, nurturing my hydration levels, am I drinking, am I eating well? Because that has a huge impact on your brain, on your gut. There's so much incredible research around the brain-gut connection because they share similar chemicals. So actually our thoughts do linked to our gut as well. And food feeds the soul, right? So ask yourself, do I need to replenish my energy levels through food, through water? Am I angry? Am I feeling emotionally charged about something? What can I do to reduce any emotional friction that I'm feeling? Am I lonely? Loneliness can really play a huge factor in terms of our state of mental health. Can I connect with someone, or what can I do to just connect with one person in this moment to feed that and support me in that moment? Am I tired? I mean, I'd love to go into way more detail around this, but sleep is a huge pillar of our well-being and our mental health in general. So if we're really not getting good sleep, that massively has an impact on our cognitive function in the brain, our ability to make effective decisions, motivate ourselves, etc. So sometimes just checking in on those four areas can completely reset us. If you're, eating, drinking well, if you're looking after your emotions in a way that works for you, if you're connecting with people, and if you're sleeping well, that will automatically give you a boost with whatever it is that you're going through. Have I understood this correctly? If you're in a challenging conversation with somebody, try to take a step back and look at it from different standpoints, which isn't always easy to do, but it can just ensure that you're, trying to look at things from different perspectives, or what is the wider context here? Sometimes if people come to you with a certain energy and you're like, whoa, what have I done? It's easy to take things personally, but trying to look at the wider perspective and remind ourselves, this person has a life outside of work, for example, or what we're just talking about here. Is there something else maybe going on that is triggering this kind of behavior, especially if it's out of the norm for this person? They're not usually like this, and trying to see things from different perspectives, i.e., can I see this in a different way? And this not to excuse hurtful comments or anything that someone might have said to really rub you up the wrong way, but actually it's about, and you can obviously be open about that and say, well, that didn't really sit well with me. Can you repeat that, please? Sometimes just asking people to repeat what they said can really bring about to them just how it sounded when they repeat it and say it out loud, like, oh, actually, that wasn't a kind thing to say, or maybe I didn't mean it like that. Let me repeat myself. I notice some feelings. So if you're really struggling with any feelings, your mental health in general, it's easy to have thoughts in your mind that maybe aren't that kind, and maybe, not giving yourself enough credit. So rather than saying, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that, maybe just flipping the language. And there's a lot to be said for this. Again, we don't have a huge amount of time, but the language we say to ourselves plays a huge part in sending a very powerful feedback loop in the brain to what we believe to be true about ourselves and our sense of self-worth as well. So instead of challenging self-thoughts and self-talk, I notice I'm feeling, just separate slightly from the emotion that's going on. You're taking notice, almost becoming an observer of your thoughts, and you're acknowledging that it's a feeling. Feelings don't define you as a human being, because feelings fluctuate and change day to day. So I notice I'm feeling is a really kind way of talking to yourself and identifying what support you might need. And what choices do I have in this situation? If you're struggling with a situation, asking yourself this question can be really empowering, because it's easy to lose sight of the fact that we have choice when we are struggling, but we always have choice. We're making multiple choices in our day-to-day lives from the moment we wake up to when we go to sleep. So we can sometimes just lose sight of that. So I hope this has been helpful, just as a suite of different mindset techniques, along with the stress reduction list that we've gone through. Just to round off, just a bit around why employee wellbeing in particular is the new workplace imperative. So as I mentioned at the beginning, prevention is better than a cure, and that's a huge value that we really are passionate about putting across through our training sessions. So just from a UK perspective, I know some of you are dialing in from different countries as well. So just to give a context about why nurturing mental health in the workplace nowadays especially is so critically important. So just in the UK alone, 1 in 6 people experience mental health problems in the workplace, and almost 15%, that is almost 15%, and almost 13% of all sickness absence days are attributed to poor mental health, which is a huge amount when you think about the wider context. Better mental health support in the workplace can save UK businesses up to 8 billion annually, which is a huge amount in terms of that return on investment of having the right support measures in place, training support in place. There's so much that can be done. And actually that return on investment really is huge in terms of reduced sick days taken due to stress, overworking, etc. Promoting wellbeing at work consistently reduces presenteeism and absenteeism, as well as boosts long-term retention of staff. So wherever you're dialing in from, I would encourage you, if you're in different countries as well, to look at what the stats are saying for staff wellbeing in your country too, and just compare. So those sources are from Champion Health and Mental Health Foundation. So what drives an effective mental health strategy at work? Many things, but just as a whistle-stop tour, a few ideas to get started for you all today. Change can just start with one person, so never underestimate the impact of just yourself or someone having that conversation, getting started with speaking to the right people, senior people perhaps, who can maybe help engineer that difference and that change for the organisation, whatever support measures you feel need to be in place. Communication, choose curiosity rather than confrontation. And I know, again, it's easier said than done, but being curious about what support could be available, about mental health in general, about opening up those conversations around mental wellness, mental illness, continue that journey of curiosity. And even when you're having conversations with others, if you're not understanding something, be curious about it. Remember that stress response in the brain. If that fires up, it shifts our critical thinking and our ability to think clearly and logically. So choose curiosity, and that can sometimes help shift the dynamic of a conversation as well. The power of one-to-ones and team meetings. If you're a manager, if you manage a team, if you look after a business, the value of having those regular one-to-ones and team meetings to get to know your staff is so critically important, not only for them to feel that level of support personally, but also, the more you get to know people, the easier it can be to identify where there might be need for support. So it's very difficult to do that when you don't really know people, right? So just try to get to know your staff as well as possible. Having flexibility and autonomy. There are so many multiple studies nowadays that highlight the importance of these two things for people to feel valued in their work. So just ask yourself, how is this managed? How is this encouraged in our workplaces? Key mental health awareness dates throughout the year. I mentioned a few earlier, the World Suicide Prevention Day recently, National Inclusion Week coming up, World Mental Health Day. There's Mental Health Awareness Week in May, the Stress Awareness Month in April. So there's loads to look at that can be pillars and really important, poignant points of the year. Important, poignant points. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? That really can help encourage you to look at what you can do internally within your organization to keep that conversation around mental well-being going and flourishing. And then social events outside of work, ways to connect with people that's not just work related, but again, getting to know people, building that trust and building rapport is also really important for nurturing mental well-being at work. So, question to leave you all with: what are you already doing really well in your organization to support mental health in the workplace, and what do you think could be improved? I think it's always really important to start with the positives, acknowledge and champion what you're doing really well, either you personally with your team or with your colleagues, or as an organization. Like, actually, yes, we do this, we do that. Brilliant. Really acknowledge that and see where, you've come from. And then there's always things that you can do more of to nurture a mentally healthy culture. So what other things do you think could be improved? Do you think it's greater training resources? Do you think it's having an app that people can connect on and monitor wellbeing levels at work? Do you think it's, do you have an EAP program in place, employee assistance program with sort of therapy sessions that could be available? So there's loads of things to look at. So I hope that's given you food for thought today. It'd be great to stay connected with you. You can find out more inspiration and insights and research through our blog. It has over 150 articles on our website, including the 5 stages of burnout. So we've got a category function as well where you can just put keywords in on our blog page. So if you just put burnout, all the blogs related to burnout will come up, including the one I mentioned earlier. Positive Mental Health Podcast. We have a podcast called Take Regular Breaks, which I'm a host of. So 40 episodes, 3 seasons. So dip into that if you like to get audio material as well. And we're on LinkedIn and Instagram at This Is Karma and at Tania Diggory. So just want to say a huge thank you to all for joining today and for watching the replay. Those of you who can join us live, as we always say at Karma, here's to your inner and outer success, not just what people see on the outside or what's also going on the inside. So thank you very much. And if we have any time extra, it'd be great to open up to any questions anybody might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tania. That was amazing. It's really interesting, isn't it? As a mental health professional, and I think I've probably over the last 6 years, I've just about earned that title. And having delivered many stress management workshops, I still learn stuff. I mean, it's the things that you forget or you sort of gloss over, or you don't necessarily put them onto yourself as much as you do to, you help support other people, but then you completely forget. And what I also forgot was just how much you know about the technicalities of stress that I've forgotten, which is
We
probably
could
due to
all do with a
stress.
refresh once in a while, right?
It was. Well, I was on a call the other day, and both me and the other, again, very heavily trained mental health practitioner, mental health nurse, in fact, we both could not remember what the amygdala was or how to. We knew it was there and what it did, but we couldn't actually come up with the name. So it's like, if nothing else, it's like I really enjoyed that. And you have such a way of getting very complex sort of meanings away in a way that people really understand. And I know, sort of having worked with you and the team over there, the testimonials that comes through of how you've shaped people. And as a recipient of that stress burnout, not having had access to any of this information back in 2015, yeah, it does go to show just how a little bit of information is so impactful to people. Yeah, we do have a few minutes for questions. If anyone has any questions they'd like to put into the chat, especially if it's a technical amygdala and hyper. I can't even remember the. Do you know what I always forget as well? And again, it's because I've not delivered for a while. The on and off pedal of, and I can never remember what that's called either. But it's that whole flight and fight. And
Oh yeah. Fight,
yeah.
flight, freeze. There's more and more coming out all the time in terms of research. And it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And I'm just going to double check the meaning of fawn as well, because that is coming up now.
I think it also used to be friend, didn't it? Whereby you would
Yeah.
befriend the bully or you would befriend the threat. So I guess the
Yeah.
fawn is maybe what the dogs do when they sort of bow down to
Oh,
the
yes, that
friend
is
and
it
then
exactly. Sort of the kind of response of attempting to appease or please a threat to avoid
mm,
harm, often through a people-pleasing response. And I think so many of us can relate to that feeling as well. So that fawn element is starting to be talked about quite a bit more. But for me, like I used to find that fight or flight was talked about a lot, but the freeze was
mm,
missed out. And I feel like
yeah.
freeze is such an important element. How many of us have been in that situation where we've just frozen up and we're like, I wish I'd said this or I wish I'd done that or reacted, it's such a human experience. It's linked to that stress response. So for me, that's a really key one to ensure is included as well.
It
Um,
is as well, and yeah, I mean, and obviously, with the work that we've done together with that whole neurodiversity, a diverse, different sort of spin on it as well. The stress comes in different waves. We have this mental stress, we have this stress of being different, and then on top of it all, we've got to go work. We
yes,
got to have all
exactly.
this other
Yeah.
stuff that flows in as well. So no,
Mm,
that's absolutely wonderful, and you've already had someone in the chat say have a calmer rest of your week.
I
So
love that.
it's
It's
already
proven.
the resonance is there as well. It doesn't look like there's a huge amount of questions coming in, which is, well, I think in one way is probably quite good because you've explained it all. And
Hopefully,
uh,
I'll take that as a compliment, right? Hopefully, I've made it clear for everybody. But if anyone does have any other questions after this, if they want to get in touch, I'll put my email address in the comments as well. But it's Tanya at
yeah,
businesskarma.com.
I popped up the link to your blog earlier as well, which is that infographic is fantastic. So yeah, no, it's wonderful. And thank you again, Tanya. It's been amazing. It's lovely to see you again. I know we meant to have a meeting last week, and I could barely talk. So
Well, yeah, you had a very valid reason. So, fair enough. And we will catch up soon. But no, it's a pleasure to be here and thank you again.
And the problem is, as soon as I laugh, I then start coughing. So no, some wonderful comments coming through, and yeah, again, just a personal and a professional thank you from Thrive for being our spotlight guest this month, and a personal thank you for me for being incredible. And yeah, hopefully we'll catch up soon. And I'm now going to segue out because I know that Emma has to edit this video, and I don't want to say anything to her at the end. So again, thank you, Tanya, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Simon and Emma, for having me. And thank you, everybody, for your comments and your kind words as well. I really hope that you've taken away lots of value from this session and hope to connect with you all again soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone.
Take
Bye bye.
care. Bye.